president obviously wanted to add to the team more than anything. I just think it was in the best interest of our communications department, of our press organization, to not have too many cooks in the kitchen.
I think there's been, at times, a disconnect between the way we see the president and how much we love the president and the way some of you perhaps see the president. And to use a Wall Street expression, there might be an arbitrage spread between how well we are doing and how well some of you guys think we're doing, and we're going to work hard to close that spread.
There's definitely an arbitrage spread in how much the White House staff loves the president and the Washington press corps loves the president. That first comment from Sean Spicer is part of a longer interview, an exclusive interview he did with our own Sean Hannity that will air at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight on Hannity. Let's bring in our panel: Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner; Anna Palmer, senior Washington correspondent for Politico and co-author of Politico Playbook; and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles.
Well, Sean Spicer, we hardly knew ye. I feel sorry for Sean Spicer. I mean, he's a guy, I think his problem was he was just way over his head. This is a guy who was not prepared, and for a particularly difficult president. I mean, if he'd had Thomas Jefferson as his president, he would have had a hard time. But with somebody as mercurial and changeable as President Trump, I think he had no chance at all. It began really badly with the first event, which was trying to pretend that the crowds at the inaugural, which is a trivial issue, were the largest ever in history, which they weren't, and he did it angrily. And then it got worse where, I mean, he actually referred to concentration camps as Holocaust centers. This is a man who should not have been in that position. And I think he's sort of liberated now. It's good for him to be somewhere else.
Anna, it's commonly reported that Reince Priebus was responsible for bringing in Sean Spicer, who worked together at the RNC, into this role. Does this fall of Sean Spicer redound to the political demerits of Reince Priebus in the president's eyes?
Well, I think every week Reince Priebus gets to the short end of the stick whenever there's someone to blame, or if Trump's looking for someone to blame. We're always, as the press corps, saying, is this Reince's last week? I do think this is a problem for him. The two are very close. And the question, I think, is an open question: is does Reince Priebus remain in that role as chief of staff, or, from the months, or does he choose to step down, more quickly?
All right, so now to the new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, who had a pretty successful debut in the press briefing room today. Here is what he said about his relationship with the White House chief of staff, Reince Priebus.
We are a little bit like brothers, where we rough each other up once in a while, which is totally normal for brothers. There's a lot of people in here that have brothers, and so you get that. But he's a dear friend. He brought me into the political system.
I have a brother, and I have two sons, so I totally get what he's talking about. Here is what Reince Priebus had to say about the same relationship with Anthony Scaramucci as part of that exclusive Hannity interview that'll be airing later tonight.
When I first came into the RNC, Anthony was one of our regional finance chairmen. Obviously, we've done a lot of things together. He was Scott Walker's finance chairman in Wisconsin. You may have seen the clip, I even almost worked for Anthony after the Romney lawsuit.
And this raises the question of exactly who does work for whom. Typically, the White House chief of staff is the chief of the staff, but that seemed less than clear when Mr. Scaramucci was asked about that today.
I'm going to let Reince answer that. I have no problem working for Reince. I can only speak about my management style, okay? The president said I report to him directly.
What do you make of that, Byron York?
Well, clearly they love each other like brothers. So that's just great. And donors, too. Yeah, he made it clear that he thought he would be reporting to the president directly. But
that's unusual, right?
Oh, it would be very unusual. But on the other hand, everything about the White House is unusual. So I'm not sure that would be crazy in the context of the White House. This actually wasn't it was a pretty good day for the White House. If you remember, it started out with us talking about Trump firing the prosecutor Mueller, about Trump
potentially firing.
Exactly, about potentially pardoning himself or his family members, and it ended up with this shakeup and actually a very polished performance from Anthony Scaramucci. And I think the fact that Spicer went today, it was not maybe it was a little surprise today, but it was not a shock, because a White House press secretary has to be a good performer on television, and especially with this president, has to be a good performer on television, and he just was not a good performer.
Anna, should we imagine that the set of attributes that Mr. Scaramucci brings to this job, he's run a very successful hedge fund, he's no stranger to politics, he's donated heavily to both parties, he was involved with the Trump campaign, should we imagine that he will have greater success than Sean Spicer did?
I don't know. I think the one question that is really out there is Anthony Scaramucci has never set strategic messaging for a corporation, for a congressional office, for a White House, and that is a big job. And the other question is going to be, does Sean Spicer's press team, does the communications department, do they see an exodus, leave? Is this an opportunity where they say, you know what, I don't want to be working here anymore, or does Anthony Scaramucci bring in his own people? So that's going to be, I think, the two things that I'm definitely going to be watching for.
And he did mention that Dan Scavino and Hope Hicks will remain on staff. Byron.
Well, we should also mention that he announced that Sarah Huckabee Sanders would be the press secretary. So she'll be the one, if they do televise briefings, she'll be the one who will actually be the face of it. So, you know, it depends on, it's unclear whether that's going to be actually much better. But there's a kind of work that the White House is not doing very much. If the president is going to announce X on Wednesday, all of a sudden on Tuesday we see lots of stories in the press about what the president is going to do. Well, that doesn't happen by accident. There's a communications director planning this kind of stuff. And that's what we don't know if Scaramucci is going to be able to do, but they haven't done it that much anyway, so anything would be an improvement.
What he did show today is that he's really good on television. He's got a certain charm, and he's not adversarial and defensive, although I would add that when he brought up the brothers, in the long roster of them in history, there is Cain and Abel, so it doesn't always work out very well.
One other individual with whom Mr. Scaramucci will have to contend is someone who was reportedly dead set against his hiring, and that is Steve Bannon. And here is how Anthony Scaramucci addressed that individual at today's briefing.
I've been interviewed about Steve. I think he's one of the smartest people that I know. I think he was instrumental in helping us win the election. He's got a strong personality. I have a strong personality. The legendary John Weinberg, who's now deceased, once said, "Some people grow, other people swell." Okay, and it's a great line to think about yourself.
Well, and perhaps words to live by, we have a bit of breaking news, which is that the Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, says there will be no subpoenas for Donald Trump Jr. or Paul Manafort, but a statement is released saying both Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort, through their attorneys, have agreed to negotiate to provide the committee with documents and be interviewed by committee members and staff prior to a public hearing. Therefore, we will not issue subpoenas. A bit of breaking news on the complex of investigations we refer to as the Russia story.